Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod with Sebastian Rusk. Sebastian is the founder at podcast LaunchLab. He's also a keynote speaker and a comedian, founder at socialbuzz.tv, socialbuzztv.com, that is, and host at the Beyond the Story podcast. We're going to talk about podcasting today. Don't think that should be a surprise. Seb, can you introduce yourself? Tell me a bit more about yourself and your businesses.
Sure, absolutely. Social Buzz TV is actually my previous company, but the current company is podcast launchlab.com. We help marketers, entrepreneurs, and business owners go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less with our proven podcast launch solution. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. And iTunes, what do you mean by iTunes?
Well, it's Apple Podcasts now. I mean, they changed the name weekly. But before it was iTunes. We take you from idea. I have an idea for a podcast to the iTunes store where your actual podcast is a reality. Idea to iTunes.
Right. And what about podcasting channels out there that are gathering some velocity, like YouTube and YouTube Shorts, for example?
Yeah, YouTube's not a podcasting platform. So YouTube's attempting to get some sort of presence established with podcast, which is kind of contradicts what the YouTube strategy is in general. So people go to YouTube for two reasons: to be entertained, to get their problems and questions answered. They don't go there to listen to a podcast. Now, younger generations would say, I like to watch my content. Great. Well, you're then watching a video show or video content on YouTube or YouTube Shorts or wherever you're doing that. But never was there a mention anywhere in the world of podcasting that video is the main aspect of it. Video has a component to it because most podcasts like this one is being recorded on Zoom, and it has a video component that then can be chopped up, and that micro content can then be shared on YouTube Shorts and Facebook and the rest of the social media platforms out there. But YouTube is not a podcast platform. They're closing down Google Podcasts at the beginning of the year because they're attempting to establish something in the world of podcasts, and they've added a podcast feature that does not contribute to anything pertaining to your existing podcast regarding your RSS feed, download stats, anything like that. It's simply another feature added on to YouTube in an attempt that, hey, maybe we'll post and pray. And if we just post a bunch of garbage on LinkedIn, maybe, just maybe, somebody will find us, because I mean, that's how Justin Bieber got discovered. So is YouTube a podcast platform? Absolutely not. Will it ever be? No, it won't. It'll continue to be what it is. It replaces cable television and is the main media video platform to consume content.
Okay, but you're talking about listening to podcasts, right? Like, to me, a podcast is two individuals talking and sharing good information. On YouTube is where I consume that information nowadays because there's a video component. For example, this podcast, it could be way better the way it's visually presented. There could be an AI that could present images, a sequence of images, so that the information is better digested by the end user. I almost don't listen anything on Apple Pods or Spotify. Just listen to Joe Rogan up there. Everything else is consumed on YouTube. And I know a bunch of kids like me that also have the same information consumption routine, so much so that they give up on Netflix, they give up on Audible even to consume most of their content on YouTube. So what do you think about that?
I think that's a different generation. You know, my daughter's 22. She loves to watch and consume content. That's the generation. But there's other generations outside just the younger generation of 10 or 20 years ago that are consuming content in a new way because they were born with a phone or a tablet in their hand. There's an established 35 and over, 40 and over crowd that are used to getting in a car and turning on a radio, going home and turning on a television, making a decision on whether or not they want to listen to something or want to watch something. Either way, human beings consume content in whatever way they prefer to listen to it. By definition, a podcast, Google defines it as an audio file uploaded to the internet to be consumed auditorily. That simply means that it's a piece of content uploaded to the internet so you can listen to it. So a podcast originally derived from the iPod, which I'm dating myself here. You probably don't even remember what that is. But an iPod was one of the first audio products Apple put out that you could load a music library into and you would listen to. And there was no visual component other than being able to see what song you wanted to go and press play on. So the word podcast was birthed from the ability to be able to cast a pod on an iPod. So that's where the name actually began, but it all began to be able to consume audio content on here. And I think that it's always going to be, I would prefer, if I'm in the car driving in 3 hours, 4 hours, which I rarely do, but if I am, or I'm on a plane or whatever it is, plane's a little different because I don't have to focus. I can have a drink, watch something, no problem. But if I'm driving somewhere, I'm not going to open up YouTube and listen to a video. Number one. Number two, if you send me a piece of content and you say, hey, check this out, and it's a video, my brain automatically says, I got to watch this. Even though I don't want to watch it because I don't consume content that way, my brain says I want to watch it. But if you send me a link to your podcast on Spotify, well, I can do whatever I want. I can clean the house. I can hang out. I can talk to a neighbor. I can hop on a flight. I can be wherever I'm at consuming the content and starting and stopping. Now, can I do that with YouTube? Sure. But there is a video component. My brain's still going, I'm not watching this. I should be watching this. So it'll always be a world where we consume content based on preference. Your generation, my daughter, loves to consume content by visually seeing it. TikTok and death scrolling and the whole nine, all of it, right? They got to see it. I want to see it and scroll and like and comment and all the emojis and all the other acronyms that I still don't understand all of them for. Sure, that generation, born with devices in their hand, all about watching and consuming. My generation, I'm 44, not that old, not that young, likes to have a choice on where I'm actually listening. I very rarely do I find somebody within this generation. I don't, what do we even consider? We're not Gen X. Maybe we're Gen X. I don't know. I forget all the names they give these generations here, but we're not baby boomers. Those would be our parents. Gen X maybe it would be Gen Xers. Anyway, this generation wants a preference. Younger generations do not. Older generations definitely want a preference because they're either watching something or they're listening to something. That's all that they understand. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Still think, yeah, the future and the court of that listeners would eventually roll to that. I guess I'm an early adopter when it comes to these things, but I'm going to make the contrarian bet that YouTube is going to be the main place where there's going to be the most engaged users in the next 5 years. Tell me about your speaking career and your comedian career. How do you juggle with that? And what are the similitudes between this and podcasting?
What's the main driver of the agency? So, our agency, have been doing this for the past 8 years. I started off originally doing digital marketing and social media content early on in 2010. And just helping people understand where we're at with all this and where we're going. And it fell on deaf ears for a very long time, much to the point where I got frustrated in 2016 and realized that I no longer want to try and convince people that this is where we're headed and this is what we're doing, but that I also had spent time building my personal brand in the space. And I wanted to figure out how to leave the space, but still stay in it, even though it kind of contradicts itself. And somebody called me one day and said, hey, can you help me start a podcast? So launched the podcast LaunchLab in 2016. And then just made non-negotiables with myself and said, listen, I'm at this point, I'm already still struggling as an entrepreneur. I'm still struggling to figure out where my place is on here. We might as well just be relentless and set some boundaries. So I just had a little conversation with myself. And I said, what do you want to do, Sebastian? Like, what do you really want to do? Because that's what we're going to go and do. I said, I want to speak. I want to tell jokes, and I want to help people launch a podcast. And if it's not those three things, I'm not leaving the house. And that was late 2016. And here we are going into 2024. It's become my life's work. I've been speaking since the summer of 2009, stepped foot on stage in 2009 for a company I was contracted with to help create training programs and facilitate them at their live events. And the second I stepped on stage, I said, this is it. This is exactly what I was born to be able to do. I'm a naturally born communicator. And it's not only my gift, but it's my responsibility to get out here and share it with the world. Now, these days, everybody and their brother wants to be a speaker, and I want to write a book, and I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I'm going to start a TikTok channel. But early on, this was still a niche space to be in. And I still think that quality professional communicators that really harness the craft and can inflict change in people through their words and what they say are still extremely unique and powerful out there. The comedy came about out of fear. So I was terrified to do comedy, but I could go on stage and crush a keynote in front of 5,000 people, no problem. That was a conundrum for me. I didn't understand how that is even possible. I did a lot of MC work for a long time. as well. When I didn't get booked to speak, I wear bow ties and do this whole, I had this whole brand from 2010 to 2016. I met Gary Vaynerchuk in early 2011, and we became just great friends, became a great mentor of mine, and really helped me better understand how to harness a personal brand while building a business. So I took that advice to heart and went out there and did something about it. But when I started to reinvent myself and figure out what was next for me, where could I niche down, I knew that, some things had to change. And the biggest things that had to change were, number one, some deep work and deep healing on myself to become who I need to be, to love myself fully, to be accountable for my life, to not point fingers, to not blame people, to not do anything. And so when I was able to go do all of those things, on the other side of that, everything else started to fall into place. And I was able to put some healthy boundaries in place for myself and non-negotiables, which were, I'm going to speak, I'm going to tell jokes, and I'm going to launch podcasts, or I'm not leaving the house. And that's just the way it is, because I said that's the way it's going to be. And it serves me well. It continues to. And like I said, we're going on year 8 here with the podcast Launch Lab with no plans of slowing down.
Right. And what are the daily habits that you put into practice to make sure that you stay on track and continue being your best self?
Just waking up every single day and trying to do the same exact thing every day. I wake up, I grab my coffee, I read, I get some quiet time. I negotiate with myself for between an hour and 3 hours on going to the gym. I finally win and go to the gym. I get done with the gym. I sit in the sauna. I meditate. I get out. I have a protein shake. I come into the studio and I work for between 3 and 5 hours on any given day. And that's about it, because that's all we're productive anyway. So this whole hustle culture and this whole gotta grind it out and work 80 hours a week is complete nonsense and completely ridiculous and not sustainable. So I've found that being able to do the same thing every single day while doing exactly what I want, when I want, how I want, is the ultimate freedom, and also the ability to be able to continue to grow and continue to lean in and continue to evolve and step in to the best version of myself. In addition to that, the opportunities that I get to do as a speaker and comedian are very unique, that not a majority of people are able to do. So I'm in rooms that people ordinarily are not in. But when I'm not speaking or I'm not telling jokes, it's not gig related, I'm still in the room. I'm still in the right rooms. I'm still in the right masterminds. I'm still meeting the right people. I'm still showing up and making sure that I'm giving as much as I possibly can about what I know to the people that don't know anything about the world of what I do. I believe that's my responsibility, just like it is to share my message and communicate effectively from the platform.
And for the 80-hour hustle culture, isn't that what Gary Vee's all about?
Maybe. Yeah, he is. He's nonstop, but that's he's a worldwide phenomenon now. It's a little different. Most people are not Gary Vee, nor will they ever be. So yeah, produce 100 pieces of content. There's a lot of stuff I don't agree with him on, but there's a lot of stuff that I do. And the stuff that I do agree with him on is enough for me to say, hey, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. Plus, we've got a decade plus history. So I've been, in the trenches, seeing this whole entire worldwide phenomenon evolve and become. And when I look back on all the predictions, there's more right than there was wrong.
What do you have to say on that content strategy? I did apply it for some time. I had an assistant follow me throughout the world. That was 3 to 4 years ago, and might restart that next year. Do you think there's sustainability into that and potential ROI into having someone follow you around producing content on pretty much everything that you do if you're an interesting individual?
If you're interesting and you have an existing following and people are interested in what you do, the problem, Charles, is that there's just too much regurgitated nonsense being shared online. We're living this big, gigantic imposter wannabe world now where everyone just woke up. I blame the pandemic, but everyone just woke up and said, I think I'm going to start creating content now. Heck, I think I'm going to quit my job, become an entrepreneur, a speaker. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to have a film crew follow me around. And then everyone starts doing that. And now we just have a bunch of noise and regurgitated nonsense. I firmly believe the tide will go out on all this. It's not sustainable for people to continue to be, to show up inauthentically on a consistent basis. You just can't do it. You can't show up inauthentically on a consistent basis and actually become something when you're talking about everything everyone else is talking about. I mean, how many quotes do you see on a daily basis posted where people don't even credit the original person who came up with the quote? I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. And there's just so much noise out there. So can it be sustainable? Are you a big, gigantic name or up and coming where people actually listen to you, follow you, and care about what you do? Yeah, you better have people creating content for you and cranking content out. But the Garys and the Hermosis and the Grant Cardones, Grant Cardone's a little bit of a different, animal. He's a successful business and real estate entrepreneur that just has endless cash. So with endless cash, you can create endless content, and with endless content, eventually enough people will know about you. But then there's guys like Hermosi and Gary who started from nothing, literally nothing at all. People think Gary sold his parents' liquor store and cashed out. He did not. He didn't take a penny, gave it all to his parents, and went and rented a conference room inside a startup in New York City with his brother and started Vaynermedia and got out there and sold large brands on the idea of taking their 15% of their 25% marketing budget and allocating it to social media. And when he was able to get some results, he needed to double down on that, double down on his existing content. He started as a wine guy. That's all he cared about, was getting his parents' business grown and talking about wine. Those were the early days, but we all start somewhere with something, but he's continued to parlay one move into another move into another move. The problem, Charles, far too many people trying to be like Gary. That was my biggest challenge when I first started, when we first met, and I knew the guy. It's even more humiliating to know I know the guy, and I was still trying to emulate him subconsciously. That's the challenge. And I've lived this, Charles, because when I finally decided to step into exactly who I am as an individual and my power, my own individual unique power, that's when everything started to change. When I started to emulate everyone, and when I started to follow the crowd, and when I started to do all these things, it was just noise. But I also felt dirty too. I felt like this isn't. There's got to be more here to all this. But the only way you're ever going to get there is to continue to peel back the layers on you. And business has a lot to do with your who you are as a person, and business has a lot to do with life, and life has a lot to do with business. But until you can only serve people at the capacity of which you've grown and healed, that's it. If you reach a plateau with yourself, that's the only place you're going to be able to reach people on here. And I don't know about you, brother, but we're just passing through here. We're mere vapors on this planet, and we never know when our number is going to be pulled. So to know that we're not willing to continue to lean in and continue to become the best version of ourselves, I think it's just negligent to not only ourselves, but the world, our family, those people that we have the opportunity, to be able to go and impact. And more importantly, when you're not doing those things, you're not showing up. And like I constantly ask myself and people that I get the opportunity to talk to, who's missing out because you're not showing up?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's like, it is your duty to sell to these people if you have something great. And yeah, I have my 2 cents on, gurus and so forth. Grant has helped me, just like he has slowed me down in some other pieces of advice, like oversell and overdeliver. I never oversell, Now it feels that consuming these pieces of content, in emulating these folks that you admire, it seems that it's a rite of passage in the content consumption world, aka growing your brain, and in the content producing world. Seems to me that I've been doing most of that in my first year. And nowadays it's mostly about producing content, and I'm producing content off my own content. So my number one mentor is Charles. It's not like Gary V, Cardone, and Mosey. And indeed, Mosey is doing content very, very well, basing off Mr. B strategies and so forth. I want to hear it from you, though. How do you consume your content nowadays? How do you make sure it's not disinformation? And how do you use writing and producing content to get smarter?
You're talking about my own content or how I consume content?
Both, because they're interrelated.
Not necessarily, because what I'm sharing, I feel that whatever I share When I stop to create a piece of content, I stop and I think for a second, okay, what do I get asked about a lot that I can answer through this piece of content that I'm going to create? Number one, what other pieces of content can I create for people that don't know that they don't know about this topic? So those are the two main things. And then the third is very rarely do I sit down and plan out a bunch of stuff. I feel that everything that I need to talk about or share is going to come directly to me based on my existing knowledge on what I know. So I kind of use that triad to be able to create content. As far as consuming content, I'm only consuming content from people that are smarter than me, up to way better things than me, far more successful than me, are not regurgitating, definitely are in their own skin, are not emulating anything, are not regurgitating anything. They're simply, that's why I love Hermosi so much. I mean, that guy's he's just so good at just staying in his lane and sharing and doing what he knows. And he's just an everyday guy. And anybody's going to get up on stage with ripped jean shorts and a wife beater on with a nose strip doesn't give a fuck. And those are the type of people that I want to be able to surround myself with and consume because they know exactly who they are. The imposters don't know who they are. The regurgitating wannabes don't know who they are. Of course they don't. That's why they're trying to be somebody else. So I'd say those are the two main things when I'm consuming content. Like, does this matter? Do I already know this? If I already know this, next. If I don't know this, I want my brain to melt when I'm consuming the content because I don't know it.
Few things here. Yeah, I do enjoy Alex's content. I do think it is better than most. I especially study Alex from a content producing game. So not necessarily the content he puts out, but like how he puts it out and so forth. Second, yes, I do think that every pieces of content out there that gain mainstream popularity, almost instantly they become mainstream and not so productive. So I do believe in having an experimental system to take that information and test it out. You know, for example, sending out a bunch of cold email to see if an idea is fitting with a specific market. So product market fit, for example. How do you evaluate if your content resonates with your audience? What metrics do you go for? How do you know that you're impacting people positively and you're gaining super fans?
They talk about it and they engage with it and they message you and they tell you, I read this and went and did this. Thank you. I heard your talk. Something really resonated and I went and did that thing. And then they actually go and do it. That's all that matters. That's the only reason that's the only way that you know that your content's being consumed correctly and effectively is because people are actually taking it and doing something with it.
Right. Well, Seb, thank you for the advice today. Where can people find out more about you?
I hang out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Shoot me a message. Let me know you saw me, heard me on Charles' podcast. Questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns about the world of podcasting. Anything I can do to better serve you and help you better understand what you don't know that you don't know. I'm definitely here to help. If you've considered starting a podcast, you don't know where to start, and you have zero desire to figure out how to do it, be happy to chat with you about our program and see if you're a fit for it. You can schedule a call with myself or somebody on my team at podcastlaunchlabnow.com. That's podcastlaunchlabnow.com. And I'm sure Charles will include that in the show notes of this episode.